The diplomatic vessel Earthbridge cut through Zaloria's amber clouds, its hull gleaming against the twin suns setting on the horizon. Commander Sarah Chen watched through the viewport as the alien landscape unfolded beneath them. Vast forests of spiral trees interspersed with crystalline formations that seemed to pulse with inner light. "Final approach to landing coordinates," announced Lieutenant Petel, her fingers dancing across the navigation controls. "Zalorian representatives are confirmed waiting at the designated site." Sarah nodded, smoothing down her diplomatic uniform. First contact protocols had been meticulously planned over 18 months of long-range communication with the Zalorians. Everything suggested a peaceful species eager for galactic alliance. "Remember," she addressed her team, "the Zalorians have no concept of handshakes or physical greetings. Their culture emphasizes distance and non-contact communication." Dr. Amara Okafor, the team's xenobiologist, looked up from her final review of Zalorian physiology. Their entire social structure seems built around maintaining personal space. Fascinating adaptation for a species with such sensitive dermal receptors. The Earthbridge touched down in a clearing surrounded by those strange spiral trees. Through the forward viewport, Sarah could see the Zalorian welcome party, about 20 slender, six-limbed beings with iridescent skin that shifted colours like oil on water. Their large faceted eyes reflected the fading sunlight in hypnotic patterns. "They're beautiful," whispered Chef Isabella Torres. And terrified, added Security Officer Miguel Rodriguez, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. "Look at their posture." He was right. The Zalorians weren't standing in formal welcome as expected. They were huddled together, their upper limbs making rapid gestures toward the forest edge. As the landing ramp descended, the aliens rushed forward in a manner completely contradictory to all their previously documented behaviors regarding personal space. Sarah stepped onto Zalorian soil, prepared to recite her carefully rehearsed greeting. She never got the chance. 3 Zalorians surrounded her immediately, their voices overlapping in the translation devices. "You must shelter. The ravaging begins. No safety in open spaces." The universal translator struggled with their panicked speech patterns. A Zalorian with deep blue skin markings pushed forward, its voice cutting through the chaos. "I am Senior Communicator Veltec. You have arrived during great danger. Please follow immediately." Rodriguez scanned the tree line, his trained eyes catching movement where others saw only shadows. "Commander, something's out there. Something big." The Zalorians froze momentarily, their bodies locking into strange, rigid poses. Senior Communicator Veltec recovered first. "It's scouts. Not hunting yet. We have minutes, perhaps less." Without waiting for consent, the Zalorians began herding the human delegation toward a formation of crystal-flecked rocks that had appeared decorative, but now slid open to reveal a hidden entrance. "What about our ship?" Sarah protested as they were ushered underground. "Your vessel is inimitable metal. Your bodies are not," Veltec responded, mandibles clicking in agitation. The Craxis emerge from hibernation cycle. "This is the ravaging. Had we known your arrival coincided." The translator faltered as the alien used concepts without human equivalent. As the hidden door sealed behind them, the humans found themselves in a vast underground complex, far more technologically advanced than the primitive landing site had suggested. Hundreds of Zalorians moved through the space, all maintaining that same alert terror. "The Craxis?" Sarah asked, trying to make sense of their situation. Veltec's skin paled to an almost translucent white. "The Apex. The Endbringer. The reason we build downward and never up. The alien's faceted eyes swiveled toward the ceiling. And it knows you are here now. Dawn broke over the Zalorian settlement, casting long shadows through crystal apertures, designed to bring filtered sunlight into the underground complex. Commander Sarah Chen hadn't slept, spending the night reviewing emergency protocols and attempting to establish contact with Earth Command. The Zalorians had provided comfortable quarters, but the constant tension permeating the air made rest impossible. "Commander, you need to see this." Rodriguez called from a monitoring station where he'd been observing the settlement's perimeter cameras. Sarah joined him, noting the dark circles under his eyes that matched her own. On the screen, a small group of Zalorians moved cautiously around an outpost structure about 2 kilometers from the main settlement. The building appeared to serve as an atmospheric monitoring station. "They're collecting data readings," explained Veltec, who had appeared silently beside them. "The Craxis hunting patterns correlate with certain atmospheric conditions. We attempt to predict." The Zalorian fell suddenly silent, multifaceted eyes fixed on the screen. The aliens at the outpost had frozen in unison, upper limbs locked in identical positions, reminiscent of the posture Sarah had witnessed upon their arrival. "What are they doing?" she asked. "They're dying," Veltec whispered. The attack happened with such speed that Sarah's brain struggled to process the images. Something massive moved from the tree line, a blur of scales and limbs that distorted the very air around it. 8 meters of armored nightmare fell upon the outpost, moving with impossible grace for its size. The Craxis resembled a reptilian centipede, its segmented body supported by 6 powerful limbs, tipped with hooked talons that sliced through the outpost's reinforced walls like paper. Most disturbing was the behavior of its prey. The Zalorians made no attempt to flee or fight. They simply remained frozen in their ritual postures as a fine mist dispersed from the Craxis' frontal breathing apparatus. "Neurotoxin paralytic," Dr. Okafor murmured, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her horror. "It's ensuring they remain conscious while it—" "Turn it off," Sarah ordered as the feeding began. Rodriguez complied immediately. The room had filled with Zalorians, all standing in perfect stillness, their skin fluctuating between pale whites and greys. Not out of respect for their fallen comrades, Sarah realized, but from evolutionary instinct, a collective freeze response triggered by merely witnessing the predator. "This happens often?" she asked when she trusted her voice again. "The ravaging claims approximately 12% of our population during each cycle," Veltec responded with disturbing detachment. "It is the natural order." Rodriguez had moved away from the monitor and was examining a schematic of the surrounding terrain. "The creature has patterns," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "It attacks from downwind, targets isolated structures first, uses the toxin to immobilize before feeding." Veltec approached him cautiously. "You speak as if understanding matters." "Understanding always matters," Rodriguez replied. He turned to Sarah, a look in his eyes she recognized from their previous missions. "Commander, my family has hunted dangerous game for generations. The Craxis is formidable, but it has vulnerabilities. The neck articulation has less armor plating, and its hunting behavior follows predictable patterns." The translator struggled to interpret the wave of distressed clicks and whistles that emanated from the gathered Zalorians. Veltec's skin had blanched completely white. "You speak of hunting the Craxis?" the alien asked, voice modulating to a higher register. "Such concepts have no meaning. One does not hunt that which defines existence itself." "On Earth," Rodriguez said calmly, "we've overcome predators far more ancient than ourselves. It's part of our evolutionary story. Sarah watched as the alien translator collapsed to the floor in what appeared to be shock. Throughout the chamber, Zalorians were buzzing in agitated communication. Some were backing away from the humans, as if they had suddenly revealed themselves to be something incomprehensible and dangerous. "I believe," Dr. Okafor whispered to Sarah, "we've just violated some fundamental taboo." The main Zalorian city extended far beneath the planet's surface, a vast network of interconnected chambers that opened into a central cathedral-like space. Dr. Amara Okafor marveled at the engineering as their Zalorian guides led the human team through pathways lined with bioluminescent fungi that responded to movement, dimming as they passed. "Everything is designed to be invisible from above," she noted, running a scanner along the curved walls. "Even their power systems generate minimal heat signatures." Commander Chen nodded. An entire civilization built around not being noticed. Senior communicator Veltec had recovered from the shock of Rodriguez's hunting suggestion, though the aliens still maintained extra distance from the security officer. "We will show you our historical archives. Perhaps then you will understand." The archive chamber contained thousands of crystalline storage devices arranged in spiral patterns. A Zalorian archivist with elaborate facial markings activated one, projecting three-dimensional images that filled the room. "Before awareness, we lived on the surface," Veltec explained, as images showed primitive Zalorians in simple surface dwellings. "The Craxus culled us in great numbers. Then came the adaptation." The projection shifted to show anatomical diagrams of Zalorian physiology, highlighting specialized glands located along their spinal structures. "The freeze response," Dr. Okafor whispered, leaning closer to the projection. "It's not just psychological, it's physiological." The pheromone glands emerged approximately 30,000 planetary cycles ago, confirmed the archivist. When triggered by Craxus pheromones, they release a biochemical cascade that induces the collective freeze. "A sacrificial strategy," Rodriguez said. "Some freeze and get eaten, allowing others to survive unnoticed." Veltec's skin rippled with dark patterns. "This is the foundation of all Zalorian society. The many remain still, so the species continues. Our language, architecture, technology, all developed to minimize Craxus attention." The projections showed the evolution of Zalorian settlements, moving progressively underground, structures disguised as natural formations. Their clothing designed to mask body heat, their music composed at frequencies outside Craxus hearing range. "Even our breeding cycles are synchronized to periods of lowest Craxus activity," Veltec added. "All life revolves around avoidance." Dr. Okafor continued scanning the historical projections. "There's no record of anyone ever killing a Craxus." The archive room filled with the now familiar distressed clicking sounds as the Zalorians reacted to the question. "Such thoughts are forbidden," Veltec explained hesitantly. "Those who attempted direct confrontation removed themselves from our genetic lineage. Only the cautious survived to reproduce." Lieutenant Petel, who had remained quiet through most exchanges, stepped forward. "On Earth, we evolved alongside predators too, but we developed different strategies, cooperation, tool use, traps. We didn't just survive our predators, we became the apex species." The archivist manipulated the crystal controls, bringing up images of Earth that had been shared during pre-contact communications. "Your world has many predators, yet none that unified your species under one evolutionary pressure. Your adaptability comes from diversity of threats, not singularity of terror." Commander Chen noticed several younger Zalorians had gathered at the entrance to the archive, their skin displaying patterns she hadn't seen before, swirls of deep blues and purples that seemed to pulse with nervous energy. "The Council has convened an emergency session," Veltec announced, noticing her attention shift. "The religious order believes your arrival during the ravaging carries significant meaning. Some elders suggest you possess divine protection to have survived surface exposure." Rodriguez exchanged looks with Chen. Divine protection isn't going to help if more outposts get attacked. We need to discuss defensive options. Defensive. The archivist's translator struggled with the concept. Against the Craxus, there is only concealment or death. "Not anymore," Rodriguez said quietly. "Not if humans are here." Outside the archive chamber, the gathered young Zalorians vibrated with an emotion the translation software couldn't properly identify, something between religious awe and revolutionary fervor. The emergency alert resonated through the human quarters, a high-pitched trilling that set teeth on edge. Commander Chen was already moving, Rodriguez and Patel falling in beside her as they hurried toward the command center. "Distress signal from Learning Pod 7. Veltec reported, skin flickering between alarm patterns. Juvenile Craxus breached the outer defenses. 34 younglings and 3 educators trapped inside. The monitoring screens showed a collapsed tunnel connecting a small dome-like structure to the main settlement. Silurian emergency teams had responded, but stood frozen in their ritual postures at a safe distance, the biochemical imperative overriding even parental instinct. "The structure's integrity?" Chen asked. "Compromised but stable," replied a Zalorian engineer. "The juvenile lacks full acid capability. It entered through waste reclamation ducts." Rodriguez had already accessed the building schematics. "It's hunting them room by room. Smart predator, cutting off escape routes first, then working inward." "We have to help them," Patel said, stating what was obvious to the humans but revolutionary to the Zalorians. Rodriguez nodded, checking the prototype weapon he'd been developing. The thermal imaging showed a vulnerable spot at the base of the skull, if we can get a clean shot. "You cannot enter," Veltec interrupted. "The pheromone concentration will trigger your autonomic nervous systems. Your species lacks our evolutionary adaptations, but universal biochemical responses still apply. Fear will overwhelm rational thought." Chen looked at the screen where small Zalorian children huddled in a central classroom, their bodies already locked in freeze postures despite their youth. "Lieutenant Patel, Officer Rodriguez, with me," she ordered. "Dr. Okafor, monitor vital signs remotely. We're going in." The Zalorians parted silently as the 3 humans donned lightweight tactical gear and respirators. Chen noticed the same young Zalorians from the archive watching from a distance, their skin patterns showing something she was beginning to recognize as the closest their species came to excitement. The journey to the learning pod took 12 minutes through emergency tunnels. Upon reaching the gathered emergency teams, Chen was struck by the eerie silence. No wailing parents, no shouted orders, just frozen officials standing in formation, waiting for the inevitable. "The respirators will filter most toxins," Dr. Okafor's voice came through their comms, "but the pheromones can absorb through skin. Stay focused on the mission parameters." Rodriguez took point as they entered the damaged structure, thermal scanner in one hand, weapon in the other. The interior was dim, emergency lighting casting red shadows across curved walls covered in educational displays. The smell hit them immediately, a sharp, chemical odor that penetrated even the respirator filters. "Movement ahead," Rodriguez whispered. "Large thermal signature, body temperature approximately 15 degrees above ambient." They advanced through the winding corridors, following destruction, shredded learning materials, claw marks on walls, small puddles of acid slowly eating through flooring. The central atrium lay ahead, a circular space with multiple doorways and a domed ceiling designed to bring in filtered sunlight. Patel took position at the eastern entrance while Chen covered the western approach. Rodriguez climbed carefully onto a twisted support beam, gaining elevation. The juvenile Craxus entered the atrium from the southern corridor, moving with predatory grace despite its youth. At 5 meters, it was smaller than the adult they'd seen on the monitors, but no less terrifying. 6 limbs tipped with hooked talons, armored scales shifting hypnotically, sensory organs pulsing along its segmented body. It hadn't seen them yet, focused on the small classroom where thermal signatures of 30 young Zalorians blazed through the walls. Patel stepped deliberately into the open, tapping her weapon against the wall. The predator whirled with shocking speed, focusing on this new prey that didn't freeze, didn't submit. In that moment of confusion, Rodriguez took his shot. The projectile struck precisely at the base of the skull, penetrating the thinner scales there. The Craxus screamed, a sound so primal it bypassed conscious thought and struck directly at the mammalian hindbrain, triggering pure terror. Then the real fight began. Word spread through the underground settlement with unprecedented speed. The human team had returned carrying their wounded, Lieutenant Patel nursing severe acid burns along her left side, but also dragging something previously unimaginable, the corpse of a juvenile Craxus. Commander Chen had established a security perimeter around their quarters where Rodriguez and Dr. Okafor worked to preserve the specimen. Outside, thousands of Zalorians had gathered in absolute silence, their bodies caught between instinctual freeze responses and overwhelming curiosity. "How are they doing out there?" Chen asked as Chef Isabella Torres entered the makeshift lab. Torres shook her head in wonder. "They're touching each other. Dr. Okafor says it's unprecedented. Physical contact is strictly ritualized in their culture, but they're standing shoulder to shoulder just to get a glimpse through the viewports." Rodriguez looked up from his work, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. The battle in the learning pod had been brutal and close quarters. The juvenile Craxus had nearly disemboweled him before Patel's well-placed shot had finally brought it down. "We've stabilized the deterioration," he reported. "Their biology is fascinating, highly acidic tissues that begin breaking down immediately after death. Some kind of evolutionary adaptation to prevent scavengers from consuming them and becoming threats themselves." Chef Torres approached the massive corpse. Her professional curiosity piqued. The muscle structure resembles Earth cephalopods more than reptiles. "What's the tissue composition?" Dr. Okafor consulted her analysis. "High protein, complex amino acid chains unlike anything in our database. But fundamentally," she looked up with the scientist's measured excitement, "it's meat." Torres ran a practiced hand along the flank of the creature, feeling the density beneath the armor plating. With the right preparation, this could be edible for humans. The acidity would need neutralizing, but I've worked with Hakal and Durian. This is just another challenge. Chen raised an eyebrow. "You want to eat it?" "I want to cook it," Torres corrected. "There's a difference. This could be a powerful symbolic gesture, consuming that which consumes them. Many Earth cultures have similar rituals." The commander considered the diplomatic implications. Their rescue of the Zalorian children had already shattered centuries of cultural conditioning. Perhaps this would reinforce the message. Humans weren't just resistant to the Craxus. They could turn the predator into prey. "Do it," she decided. But we'll need to explain the concept carefully to our hosts. The explanation proved unnecessary. Senior communicator Veltec had been monitoring their conversations through the translation system. You intend to consume the Craxus. The alien's skin had taken on a previously unseen pattern, swirling indigo and gold that Dr. Okafor's cultural database couldn't interpret. It's a human custom, Chen explained. We honor worthy opponents by incorporating their strength. Veltec made a new gesture, touching all three hearts sequentially, a deeply religious movement. This must be witnessed. The Council requests this ritual be performed where all may observe. And so it began. On the central plaza of the underground city, Chef Torres set up a preparation station. Using ingredients from Earth stores supplemented with compatible Zalorian herbs, she began the process of butchering and preparing the Craxus meat. The gathered Zalorians watched in perfect silence as Torres expertly separated flesh from armor plating, neutralized the acidic tissues with alkaline marinades, and prepared various cuts for cooking. She narrated each step through the translator, explaining the culinary traditions behind each technique. On Earth, we have a saying, she told the growing crowd. Know your food, understand what you eat, and you understand your place in the natural cycle. By the time she fired up the portable cooking unit, the gathering had swelled to include Zalorians from neighboring settlements, news of the impossible ritual spreading across their worldwide communication network. The aroma of cooking Craxus meat, spicy, rich, and utterly alien, filled the plaza. The first piece, ceremonially plated, was offered to Commander Chen. She took it without hesitation, chewed thoughtfully, and nodded in approval. Tastes like victory, she said, loud enough for the translators to carry her words to the farthest observers. Throughout the vast chamber, thousands of Zalorians vibrated with silent emotion, watching humans casually consume their evolutionary nightmare. 3 days after the feast, the attacks began. Commander Chen was awakened by the now familiar alert signal, but this time at triple the normal intensity. She found the command center in controlled chaos, multiple monitoring stations displaying breached outposts across the region. 15 confirmed Craxus sightings in the past 6 hours, reported Lieutenant Patel, her bandaged side still limiting her movement. They're targeting settlements that have been untouched for generations. Veltec's skin had settled into a constant grey pallor as reports continued flooding in. This behavior is unprecedented. The ravaging typically follows established territorial patterns, but these attacks... The translator struggled to convey the aliens' distress. Rodriguez studied the tactical display, noting the distribution of attacks. They're probing defenses, establishing a perimeter around us. He looked up, meeting Chen's eyes. They're responding to the death of one of their young. This isn't random predation, it's coordinated. Dr. Okafor pulled up biological scans from her examination of the juvenile. The neural complexity suggested advanced cognition, but this indicates true social structures, possibly even rudimentary cultural transmission of information. The Craxus share knowledge. Veltec's translator glitched, unable to process the concept in Zalorian terms. They're not just animals, Okafor confirmed. They're responding strategically to a new threat, us. Chen assessed their options. The diplomatic mission had become something far more complicated. They could evacuate to orbit, but that would leave the Zalorians facing escalated attacks, potentially triggered by human actions. Their limited security team couldn't protect all settlements simultaneously. We need to understand what we're dealing with, she decided. Rodriguez, I want complete analysis of attack patterns, vulnerabilities, potential countermeasures. Commander, A young communications officer interrupted. "There's someone requesting to speak with you." A Zalorian who wasn't authorized to enter the command center. Chen turned to find a smaller Zalorian with distinctive blue-green markings standing at the entrance, surrounded by nervous guards. She recognized the pattern. This was one of the younglings they had rescued from the learning pod. "Let them approach," she ordered. The young Zalorian stepped forward with unusual confidence. "I am Kervex, third cycle student of biological sciences. I have information about the Craxus you must know." Rodriguez gave the alien an appraising look. "You're the one who didn't freeze when we entered the classroom. You helped guide the others out." Kervex's skin flickered with what they'd learned to recognize as Zalorian pride. "I have studied the historical records beyond the permitted archives. There are ancient texts that speak of a primary Craxus, larger and more intelligent than all others. The Night Stalker." Veltec made a sharp gesture of religious warding. "These are forbidden myths, not science. They are observation records from the pre-freeze adaptation period," Kervex countered. "Before our species evolved to submit, we studied our predator. The Night Stalker coordinates the hunting patterns of lesser Craxus. It has existed for thousands of cycles, growing far beyond normal size." The young Zalorian activated a small data crystal, projecting ancient imagery that showed a massive Craxus, nearly twice the size of the adults they'd observed, distinctive scarring along its primary sensory organs. "The attacks follow a pattern consistent with the ancient records," Kervex continued. "The Night Stalker tests defenses before leading the primary assault. It is, directing the others toward your location." Chen exchanged glances with her team. "You're saying we've injured the alpha predator of your entire planet?" "Yes." Kervex's skin pulsed with unexpected colors, determination, perhaps, or something the translators couldn't capture. "But I and others like me have been secretly studying your combat techniques. We believe that with human assistance, we might overcome our evolutionary programming." Veltec's skin had gone almost transparent with shock. "You propose hunting the Night Stalker. This is heresy against nature itself." "This is survival," Kervex responded. "The humans have shown us another path. We need not be prey forever." Rodriguez stepped forward, tactical plans already forming. "We need a specialized team, proper equipment." "And Zalorian environmental knowledge," Chen added, studying the young alien with newfound respect. "A joint operation." Outside the command center, the alert sirens continued to wail as more settlements reported Craxus sightings. The hunt for the hunter was about to begin. The hunting party departed at dawn, moving through mist-shrouded terrain that no Zalorian had willingly traversed in centuries. Rodriguez led the human contingent, himself 2 marine specialists, and surprisingly, Chef Taurus, who insisted her sensory training was valuable for tracking. Kervex guided 5 young Zalorians who had volunteered despite the Council's formal prohibition. The ancients called this the Whispering Forest. Kervex explained, pointing to spiral trees that grew progressively larger as they moved deeper into the restricted territory. The wind through the hollow trunks creates sounds that mask approach. Rodriguez nodded appreciatively. Natural stealth advantage. The Craxes use it to hunt, but so can we. They had prepared meticulously over 3 days, developing specialized weapons based on their knowledge of Craxus vulnerabilities. Each team member carried antitoxin injectors and communication devices shielded from the electromagnetic interference generated by the predator's sensory organs. By midday, they found their first sign. A massive claw mark scored 2 meters high on a crystalline rock formation. Territorial marking. Kervex translated, Skin rippling with nervous patterns despite the chemical suppressants Dr. Okafor had developed to dampen their freeze response. The Night Stalker claims this entire region. Taurus knelt, examining a patch of disturbed soil. Something large passed through recently. The soil compression suggests at least 2 tons of weight. The trail led them to an ancient structure partially buried beneath centuries of growth, a curved wall of unfamiliar material that hummed faintly when touched. Pre-freeze technology, whispered one of the young Zalorians, scholar markings visible along their upper limbs. The Forbidden Ruins. Rodriguez scanned the structure. Some kind of research outpost, lady. The configuration suggests observation platforms. Kervex approached the sealed entrance, tracing glyphs that activated at the touch. The ancient texts spoke of places where our ancestors studied the Craxus, before fear became our evolutionary path. The door slid open with surprising smoothness, revealing a circular chamber filled with dust-covered equipment. As they cautiously entered, lights activated automatically, illuminating displays that flickered to life after millennia of dormancy. It's still operational, marveled Taurus. Some kind of self-sustaining power source. The marine specialists secured the perimeter while Rodriguez and Kervex examined the ancient technology. Information flowed across screens in an archaic Zalorian dialect that Kervex struggled to translate. They were studying Craxus biology, searching for vulnerabilities. The young alien's skin displayed patterns of scientific excitement, overriding ingrained fear. Our ancestors were not always prey, they fought back. A sudden notification pulsed across their communications. Silent alert from the perimeter team. Something was approaching. Rodriguez motioned everyone to predetermined positions. Remember the plan. Target the neural cluster at the base of the skull. Aim for the sensory organs to disorient it first. The silence stretched like an elastic band ready to snap. Then came the sound, not the expected rustling of vegetation, but a rhythmic clicking that reverberated through the ancient structure. Intelligence testing acoustics. The Night Stalker didn't burst through the entrance as anticipated. It emerged from a concealed access tunnel within the facility itself, demonstrating knowledge of the structure's layout. At over 12 meters long, it dwarfed the juvenile they had fought previously. Battle scars marked its armored hide, and its sensory organs pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed almost communicative. Most disturbing was its behavior. It didn't immediately attack. It observed, sensory organs focused on each team member in turn, head tilting in assessment. This was no mindless predator acting on instinct. The Night Stalker was analyzing them, identifying the greatest threat. Its eyes locked with Rodriguez's, predator recognizing predator across the evolutionary divide. The hunt had become something far more complex than anyone had anticipated. 6 months after the battle in the ancient research facility, Commander Sarah Chen stood on the surface of Zaloria, watching the twin suns set without fear of predators lurking in the gathering shadows. The landscape had transformed, not just physically, but culturally. Hard to believe this was all forbidden territory half a year ago, Torres remarked, setting down a tray of appetizers on the observation platform. Small pieces of seasoned meat garnished with local herbs glinted in the fading light. Chen took a piece, savoring the complex flavor. Is this from the latest hunt? Young Craxus, taken ethically from sustainable territories, Taurus confirmed. The new hunting protocols are working well. The Zalorians are quick learners once they overcome the biochemical freeze response. Below them, a mixed group of humans and Zalorians engaged in training exercises. Rodriguez had established what the locals called the Predator School, teaching Earth hunting techniques adapted to Zalorian physiology. The chemical suppressants developed by Dr. Okafor allowed the aliens to overcome their evolutionary programming long enough to learn new responses. How are the medical trials progressing? Chen asked as Curvex joined them on the platform. The young Zalorian, now bearing the distinctive markings of a revolutionary leader, displayed patterns of scholarly excitement across their skin. Dr. Okafor's discovery exceeds all expectations. The processed Craxus neurotoxin creates a temporary empathic bond between our species. We can share consciousness, memories, emotions, true understanding beyond translation. Chen nodded, remembering her own experience with the refined toxin. For brief moments, she had seen through Zalorian faceted eyes, felt the weight of evolutionary terror and the exhilaration of freedom from it. In turn, Curvex had experienced human determination, courage, and adaptability from within. The battle with the Night Stalker had nearly ended in disaster. The massive predator had demonstrated tactics no one anticipated, using electromagnetic pulses to disable equipment, targeting communication devices first, separating the team with calculated precision. 2 humans and 3 Zalorians had died before Rodriguez and Curvex managed to lure it into the facility's ancient containment chamber. In its final moments, the Night Stalker had released a concentrated neurotoxin cloud, unlike anything previously documented. Instead of paralyzing its prey, it had created a brief neural connection, a flash of shared consciousness between predator and hunters. They glimpsed fragmentary images, ancient Zalorians in laboratories, early experiments, genetic manipulation. The research teams at the temple have confirmed our suspicions, Curvex said, following Chen's gaze toward the distant ruins now surrounded by research outposts. The Craxus were not natural evolutionary developments. They were engineered by our ancestors as ecosystem regulators, then modified for increased intelligence during the early conflicts. When they escaped control, our species adapted the only way it could, by developing the freeze response and building an entire civilization around avoidance. Torres shook her head in wonder. Your ancestors created their own nightmares, then forgot they did it. Evolution is not always linear progress, Curvex replied. Sometimes it is acceptance of limitation, but now we have choice again. Below them, a small Zalorian child approached the training area, carrying what appeared to be a practice weapon. Instead of displaying fear patterns, the child's skin pulsed with colors of determination, mimicking the human instructors. Around its neck hung a small pendant, a Craxus talon, symbol of the new cultural movement spreading across the planet. The Council has approved the permanent human embassy, Curvex announced, and the joint scientific initiative to study the neurotoxin's empathic properties. We believe it may have applications beyond our 2 species, a foundation for true understanding throughout the galaxy. Chen watched as the young Zalorian joined the training session, moving with newfound confidence. From paralyzed with fear to predators in their own right, all because we showed them how to eat their nightmares. Not just eat them, Curvex corrected, skin patterns forming the new philosophical maxim spreading among Zalorian youth. To understand them, to become them, to transcend them. As darkness fell, lights activated across the surface settlements, the first permanent above-ground Zalorian structures in millennia, no longer hiding from the nightmare, but facing it under the open sky.